Ellicott City it's a little difficult to describe because it's very unique. It has the historic buildings, of course, but you have other small towns in Maryland, Pennsylvania that have those small brick facades and older buildings. But Ellicott City has this air of creativity and this really strong interwoven community that I think is really unique to this area. Ellicott City is very open. When you're here, you become part of the community immediately, and that's just very difficult to find. We've owned the building about 3 years. As I say, we opened 3 months before the flood, so it's been just about a year. But it's, as I like to say, it was 3 months in the execution, 30 years in the planning. It was something I had planned to do for a very long time, and I just waited until I retired to do it. It was a nice day, and so it was in July, so it was crowded. It was busy. I remember the last customer I had very clearly because they bought a unique item I had. It was a vintage piece. It was a ceramic donkey for the political donkey, and it had American flag patterning, and it was handcrafted. It was the only one I'd had. I'd had it for a long time, and this couple came in from Pennsylvania, and that's what they wanted. But they were on motorcycles, so I agreed to ship it to them. And so sitting here, unfortunately, on this level that day, and they were the very last transaction. So unfortunately, the piece didn't survive the flood. But then it started to rain very hard. And
about what time of day was this?
About between 6 and 6:30, it started to rain very hard. I mean, very hard. I walked down to my car about 6:30. My car was right next to the river. And I had water in my pockets. I mean, it was raining that hard. So people were laughing at me as I was walking down the street because it was just torrential and I didn't have an umbrella. So I left that around 6:30. I decided to close early because of the rain. And when I went home, and I'd been home about 45 minutes maybe, and my son, who at the time lived in New York City, called me and he said, Mom, you need to look on YouTube. There's a video somebody's just posted. And it's taken out of Portales, which is a restaurant across the street. And it's looking down from the second floor on your building. And it looks like there's maybe 6 or 7 feet of water. I'm like, no, can't be. It must be something else. No, I pull up this video and I'm looking at it, and you see the cars washing by down the street, and it's very hard to absorb and comprehend what you're seeing. As I was looking at the video, my phone rang again, and it was a young woman that works maybe 4 doors farther downhill, who was brand new to town. She had only lived here a very short time, and she rented one of the apartments in our building. So I was really the only person that she knew in town, which is why she called me, I think. But she said, we're on the counters. We don't know what to do. There's water coming in the door. There's a man here who was washed down the street and he's injured. She said, we have no place to go. There's no stairs to the second story. Well, I don't know what to do. And so we got 911 on the phone, and they came and got her by boat, which was fortunate. But as tragic as those events were, with 2 people losing their lives, it could have been a lot worse than it was. The water came to the ceiling in the second half of the store, the back of the store. It washed out most of the wood furniture. It washed out all of our business records, laptops, computer equipment, that kind of thing were gone. There was a car bumper inside the store, Virginia plates. So we think it was probably a car that hit the front window and then ultimately broke the windows, and that's how the water came in. But we're a food store primarily, and the water was toxic, the mud that was left behind. So we threw everything out. Well, I had talked to Alan Kittleman, our county executive, because he'd been at our ribbon cutting very recently, just before the flood, and he warned me. He said, just be prepared, there's nothing left. So I expected that. And I'd seen enough video footage of some of our items down by the river There was a photo of our flag, our American flag, that was sitting, somebody had propped up. And some of the pieces from our front window were sitting down by the water. So I knew it was not going to be good. They initially did not let us go in the buildings. They brought us down essentially by golf cart, Jeep. They had another name for them. And we were not allowed to get out. So it was almost a week before we went inside, but you could see pretty much what was the status of things inside. Different. But my primary concern was on the one thing in the store that really couldn't be replaced, and that was a ceramic mug that was about this size, that was my great-great-grandfather's, and it had his occupation, grocer, and his name. And they used to keep them in the barbershop, and so you'd have your occupation and your name on it, and it's a family heirloom. And we brought it in, and we had it sitting on a corner shelf behind the register, is because we've kind of carried on that family tradition. So when my daughter and my sister and I began this business, we wanted to carry on that grocer business from a couple generations ago. And I knew it was below the water line, and I didn't think there was any way it would survive. So we were trying to get in close enough to be able to look in to see if it was still there. And so initially, when we came down by Jeep, we couldn't see that far in. It wasn't until maybe 10 days after the flood when they finally let us back inside. And everything around that little corner shelf was trashed. The small refrigerator where we had the cooler for drinks, that was gone, and the light above it was trashed. And on that shelf, there were these two bread mixes that had floated over and perfectly cushioned and protected the cup in the corner. And it was perfectly intact. It was the only intact thing in the entire building. So, my husband took a picture of me that day, because I've got the cup and I'm ecstatic, yay. And that was, what matters is human life and the things that really aren't replaceable. Everything else is just stuff. The first time they brought us down the street, all I could think of was the photos I'd seen from Phuket, Thailand, because it looked like a tidal wave had gone through the street, the whole street from the top to the bottom. I mean, there were cars upended in deep trenches in the middle of the road. I mean, it was like some kind of special effect. It was very difficult to absorb and comprehend. And I think right away the community was rallying. People from around this area, people who were not from this area but had been to this area, the residents. I mean, everybody really started to pull together, and we were very fortunate. This is an area where we have really great leadership, and they were there for us. I'll tell you, the county executive, he walked down the street every day for months after that flood. He was here every day just to see how people were doing, not to get filmed on the street. We had a bit of that with some people from out of the area, but no, but the local representatives and things, they were here from the beginning all the way through. I mean, it was just amazing. People were bringing supplies and donating it. We had people coming in and cleaning up that mud. I mean, we were in here too, but it was very toxic. We had boots and a suit and gloves and masks, and it wasn't something you would naturally want to volunteer for. And we had people we didn't know just come up to us and say, I'm willing to come down here, and they just worked in that mud for days. We had to build back slowly. We started doing the farmer's market, and we brought our survivor glass, because of course all food item was thrown out, but we have some wine glasses and things like that, and people wanted to buy something that had been through the flood and survived. So we had survivor glass and survivor jewelry, which was our jewelry. We found a lot of jewelry in our store that belonged to other jewelry stores on the street. We, gave those back. But so we started with a farmer's market, and then, in small bottles of some of the things that we carry. And then we worked our way up to having a more longer-term space at one of the local country clubs that they donated. And then I actually when we found that the street was going to reopen on October 6th, we really wanted there to be something open on Lower Main Street because there was nothing open. So we rented a small space on the street for 4 months, October, November, December, and then January. And we opened a small store, like a pop-up store in there, and we called it Main Street Rising. And that allowed us to actually have somebody doing business down here when the street opened. And that was quite a day. There were no speeches or anything. The police were in a line across the street at the top of the road, and they stepped back, and cars were coming down, and they were honking and waving, and there was cheering, and it was really something.
It's been one heck of a feeling.
It was. My daughter was in tears. It was something. So that was in the fall, and that helped quite a bit. So it allowed us to be open for Christmas. And we got our space. We had two priorities with this space. One, we have 3 families that live upstairs. They have children. One of the mothers was expecting the beginning of November. They all wanted to be back in their house. And they were all in temporary housing for almost 3 months. So our priority first was getting the utilities for the building, which are here on the ground floor and went underwater, getting them replaced back online so they could move back in. And that took until the very end of October. So that was our primary focus. So they were able to get back in by the end of October when the Red Cross funds expired. And the lady had her baby the first week of November, so she was back. So that was the first step. It then took another 2 weeks before this space was usable, and so it was about mid-November, and by then we were very well set up in this temporary space, and it was 6 weeks before Christmas. So we made a decision not to move, and we opened the space up to 5 of the other stores who had not yet located temporary space. So there was actually like a shopping bazaar in this space. So there were 5 different businesses that were set up in here for the Christmas season. And that was great because it brought a lot of life to this end of the street. And it was good for them. This was something that I've wanted to do my whole life. My husband swears I talked about it 25 years ago on our first date. So it was very important to me. I'm not a quitter. I felt like I had an obligation, in part because I was able to come back. And I knew it would be much more difficult for the businesses that were really based on personal collections, like a vinyl record store, an antique store. I think it was an interesting period of time because there was a lot. People were very vocal online, and sometimes face-to-face about viewing this as like totally insane and stupid to be coming back to an area that's in a floodplain. This building actually had never had a flood in it. It has no flood history. So we adopted the motto of rebuild, restore, and we had a banner with our store name on it, and we put it up at the farmer's market. Well, one of the local papers did a cartoon parodying the sign and had 3 people standing in rising water and saying rebuild, restore, and then, they go underwater. So I thought, all right, I guess it's fair game, you want to make fun of us for doing this. But I wrote them a letter, and they did publish it, and I told them, I said, it's not that we're unaware of the risk, that we're oblivious to it. It's a conscious decision, and it's a difficult decision, whether you come back or not. There's pros and cons. But there's a lot here that's worth trying to preserve and restore. I gave the analogy of the old cartoons when I was growing up, Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football. And the humor being Charlie Brown always had this endless faith that this time would be different, and he actually kicked that football. So I guess it could be compared to that. People say, how many times would you come back? And I'd say, well, at least one more. And that may be the last one. I don't know what I would do if it happened again. although I'd probably be a lot more efficient with it because now I would know exactly what to do. So who knows what to do. Well, my daughter said that watching the way the community reacted and the way people behaved really restored her faith in people. And I think that is true. How can we walk away when there were so many people wishing us well and sincerely wishing us well and doing whatever they could with their own limitations to try to help us come back, whether it was just moral support. I mean, we had people come in when we were in our temporary space, and they would bring boxes of beautiful glassware, and they would say, I just want you to have this. Sell it and do what you can with it for your business. Total strangers. They would drop it off and they'd say, here, this is for you, and they would leave before you even had a chance to find out who they were. And that's what it has really been like. People they made a deliberate attempt to buy here in this area for Christmas, for the holidays. So, how do you walk away when you have that kind of support? So I love it down here. I think I love it more than I did before we opened the first time. I'm hoping that was as much a freak occurrence, and it truly was a 1,000-year storm. And they really have worked hard to try to make some improvements and changes to keep it from happening again. I mean, we had a very heavy rain a couple days ago, and there was no water on the street. So that was encouraging. Well, we had a lot of questions about what happened here, particularly now that we're back together and everything looks normal.
Right.
And so this was our water line here. So it went to the ceiling in the back, which has a 7.5-foot ceiling. So it's just below this soffit that has our mission statement, live well, give back. And so you can see that actually survived, the letters and things that are up on that shelf. This is the exterior right after they've had a chance to go through and clear it for any casualties, I guess is the best way to put it. So that's what the writing represents.
And what's the general reaction when they see these pictures for themselves?
And usually some 4-letter word. And then they say, they have the, hey, yeah, come over and look at this. I don't think a lot of people that are here now have a full awareness of just how bad it was. You think of flood, and you think, water slowly rising 2 or 3 feet up the wall or something. But this level of devastation.
And we're talking about 7.5 feet.
I mean, I just don't think they
right
had
off the ground.
Any idea that it was.
I mean, we're underwater right here. If you're
underwater
right now,
absolutely.